Property is still impossible. This is part 3 of my property series. It's about property and why it's impossible. Please watch the other ones before this one. Property is impossible because if it exists, society devours itself. When you make a shoe in a factory or any product in a factory, you'll not be able to purchase that product for the labor it takes to make the product, because you will have to pay the excess profit. Also, at many stages of production, if we take a phone for example, the workers mine the minerals. Oil workers pump up oil for plastics. Workers gather sand for the glass. Workers make the glass, the circuit board, etc. In all stages of production, there are companies that have to generate a profit. But for many of these companies, a problem is that there's a competition at one hand that forces them to lower prices as much as possible. But also there's no constant demand. It's only when they get orders. So instead of having contractors, they have to rely on either capital or loans to pay workers when they have no sales. Now when they sell the product, they have to pay for labor, the interest, the loan, and for the property and get profits for it. Since workers have to compete amongst each other to have the lowest pay to be able to get the jobs, there's typically a higher demand for jobs than the supply of jobs. This makes exploitation even greater. You can see this with even workers of different countries now having to compete with globalisation. But also to make a better profit, you need scarcity. In the capitalist economy, the price is regulated by the free market with supply and demand, but there's no incentive to produce more than just below the demand. This creates a false scarcity and it drives profits up. When Apple, for example, releases iPhones, there's a reason why the prices can be so high and profits can be so high, surpassing all the costs of the production. It's the scarcity. Even though we have the capacity to end hunger, there's no economic incentive or motive, meaning that it would be unprofitable to do so, because that would mean there would be no scarcity and thus less profit in doing so. All the anger that comes from the inequality and workers seeing they do not enjoy the fruits of their own labor means they will inevitably have strikes, protests and such, which also harms the economy. Then once a mutual agreement has been made, society keeps going on. The problem here is the inflation and interest, which means the workers, to maintain their conditions, have to have a constant struggle. If they do not struggle, they will experience a degradation of living standards and a constant reduction of purchasing power. This form of economy results in repeating economical crises, where there will become inevitable bubbles, and then we will have sharks trying to exploit the loss of other people and make gains. Every time there is a crisis, people lose a lot of money from investments, while others start investing only to lose it later or become capitalists themselves. Also, trying to apply welfare with property does not provide a solution to the problem itself. It's like putting a band-aid on a decapitated person. With socialism on the rise, a lot of countries have introduced high taxes for the rich, who have no incentive or motive to pay that tax because that would be unprofitable, and who will do whatever they can to avoid paying those taxes to gain as much capital as possible. At the same time, it doesn't remove the roots of the problem. This means that even with laws saying they will have to pay tax, they will still do whatever they can to avoid paying the taxes. You can see that with tax havens and other ways of tax avoidance. Social housing to stimulate a booming housing market only makes people either stay in rent slavery or debt slavery. With the rise of thoughts of universal basic income, you can look at Scandinavian countries or other countries with social benefits to the disabled and jobless. The rent always rises according to the amount of benefits because the landlord will always have to raise prices. And since there's a fabricated scarcity of housing, they can always set the rent to be just so the tenants will not starve. The welfare does only provide a temporary relief to the people in question, and since there's still property, they will continue being destitute. For working cooperatives in the capitalist system, the same sort of cannibalist tendency shows. Many cooperatives start equally, with the workers owning their fair share, where they see that they can earn a quick buck by becoming a stock company or hiring people for profit. You see Scandinavian cooperatives opening factories in Poland, hiring Polish workers and thus exploiting them by not having them have a share of the profit. The former joint bakery cooperative of my hometown realized there was more money in renting out property than there was selling bread. This was undertaken by the inheritors of the stocks of the cooperative. And that was all for this part. And I'll keep my rambling down this time. I will make my next part soon.